Amazing Grace, the traditional salute to fallen firemen, played by the Scottish Volunteer Bagpipers. The Star-Spangled Banner here in Europe, performed by Barbara Tucker of Brooklyn, New York.
It is my honor to truly be here to represent American and humans. May we all, in our hearts and through our voice, let the spirit of love ring through as I sing.
Those are just a few examples of the special ceremonies that have been created here at Euro Speedway by the promoter and the German race fans to show respect for the tragedy in the United States. And they too provided these red, white, and blue ribbons to all of the teams. And as soon as they were made available, fans came from everywhere wanting to wear these ribbons as a show of solidarity with the United States. The great overlying question here, though, is the emotional condition of these teams and drivers, the psychological effect of this great tragedy.
No other sport requires the intense concentration for the duration of time that motor racing does. Every driver at some point in his career has driven knowing that a fellow competitor has either been seriously injured or worse, or under the most terrible weather and track conditions. Today, these drivers have to remain focused. That's their job. But for one competitor in the field, Michael Andretti, he was back in the States when the terrorist attacks occurred. Today, for Michael Andretti, he faces an enormous challenge to maintain focus and to maintain that concentration over 500 kilometers of racing.
It's been an unbelievable last few days. You know, it's a minor problem really when you think about the scope of things going on. But you know, we went through a lot of hard work to get over here, and to finally get here was good. You know, it was a bit of a relief. You know, I'm here with the Cart family, and I'm here to do my job if I'm called to do it, and you know, that's a bit of a relief. But again, it's a very small thing though compared to everything that's happening.
For Michael Andretti and the other drivers, it may be easy. For the teams, it may be something else. Lap 2, the cars rolling. This is a lap of remembrance. Gary Gerould.
Well, another in a continuing series of moving and emotional moments. You look down this line, the team standing shoulder to shoulder in their solidarity, the flags waving. You've seen the flowers, you've seen the looks on the faces of the crew members. To a man, they would tell you they don't want to be here. They want to be home. They want to be with their families, but they know that that's not possible at this time. But now, as they pay tribute to their drivers and they get ready to go racing, they know that for the next couple of hours, they'll do their best to put aside the concerns, the apprehensions, all the fears, the distractions, and they'll try to go about business as usual, as difficult as that may be for each and every one of us.
So responding for the first time to the traditional command of gentlemen, start your engines, the field then passing down through the pits in Cart's lap of remembrance. Now the pace picks up. They line up according to their points positions because qualifying was canceled. So the front row is Gil de Ferran and Kenny Brack. In the second row, Helio Castroneves and Michael Andretti, who just arrived here. The third row, Dario Franchitti and the rookie Scott Dixon with only about 20 minutes in the car. Row 4, Cristiano D'Amata and Roberto Moreno. The fifth row, Patrick Carpentier and Tony Kanaan. In row 6, it's Paul Tracy and Christian Fittipaldi. In the seventh row, Alex Tagliani, Jimmy Vasser. Row 8, Bruno Junqueira and Max Pappas. Row number 9 is Adrian Fernandez and Memo Gidley. In the 10th row, Brian Herta and Oriol Servia. Michel Jourdain Jr. and Alex Zanardi make up row 11. Row 12 is Mauricio Guzman and Max Wilson. Row 13, Shinji Nakano and Tora Takagi. And alone in the back, the new rookie, the dominant guy in Indy Lights, Townsend Bell. So here it is a 500-kilometer race, 154 laps, just over 311 miles.
If it stays green, it should be a 3-stop race, although as we've seen in many of these races, pit strategy and fuel mileage will play a major factor.
We'll show you this truly a tri-oval here at Euro Speedway.
It's a very unusual track. It's in fact a large triangle. 2 miles in length, qualifies as a super speedway, but they do brake and downshift here.
So as the field now moves into position, some cars moving to catch up at the back, the rows of 2 over in what is the second turn on this track. We're expecting the weather here to actually be all right. There was original suggestion of rain and showers, but we looked from the top of the grandstand over to the east of the track where the weather comes, and right now it looks pretty good. In fact, a bright sun shines on this track. So with Gil de Ferran and Kenny Breck on the front row, they head for the front straightaway and look for a green flag. De Ferran drops in behind Breck. 3 wide through the first turn. Now onto the second straight. Breck begins to pull away. Tony Kanaan running high and wide there. You will notice on a number of the cars what appears to be a different livery. In some cases, it's because the cars were a cigarette sponsor and that had to be removed in Europe. In other cases, sponsorship in its entirety pulled off the car to make absolutely sure that they were showing respect for the United States. So Kenny Breck leads the first lap here in Europe, followed by Andretti, who made some bold moves on that opening lap, slotting into second place, then de Ferran and Castroneves.
Consider how difficult it is for these drivers on this first race at this new circuit. Practice was rained out on Thursday and Friday morning. They only got a couple hours of practice time yesterday afternoon. And for drivers like Townsend Bell, his first time in a champ car, or Scott Dixon, who was ill, they have very, very limited track time.
And keeping an eye right now on Alex Zanardi, who was the fastest by far during the warm-up and during the practice that they had yesterday. They've only had about 2 hours and 30 minutes of total practice available to them. So they're learning a great deal here in these first laps of the race. Breck over Andretti, then de Ferran. Zanardi has moved up to 17th place. Pappas has come 1 place forward. On the lap itself here, Parker, more brake usage than we would normally see on an oval.
No pressure, Michaels P2.
Scott Remke talking to Kenny Breck. That's right, Paul, on this track, because of this unique triangular design, the corner's sort of reminiscent of turns 3 and 4 at Motegi. They've got to use the brakes. A lot of the drivers downshifting 3-4 times a lap, pulling about 3.5, almost 4 Gs in these corners.
Helio Castroneves tries to take a look to the inside of de Ferran.
But it's very different than a Michigan or a Fontana. The draft, because of the aerodynamic changes for this particular race, means they won't get as much buffeting, but they also won't get that enormous tow down these straightaways, which range in length well over 1/4 mile.
It's kind of fun listening to these drivers before the start of a race on a new track. Almost universally at every new track, oh, I don't think we're going to be able to pass. I think that's more psychology for the other drivers, because the guys who tend to say it are also usually the first ones to go out and prove that you can.
And
on board with Memo Gidley, now 12th place.
And on this track, 5 to 7 degrees of banking, and the track is extremely wide, between 61 to 81 feet, so there are opportunities to pass.
Let's go to Gary Gerould.
Well, quick update relating to Adrian Fernandez. We have a report of an engine misfire. Obviously, they're hoping that they can shake it loose, but we're hearing right now it could be an early end to the afternoon here for Fernandez.
Fernandez, 18th. He started 17th, so at least he's generally holding position as we're back on board Gidley.
On this heavy fuel load, you saw Gidley go down 2 gears. Earlier, he was just going down 1 in that corner. As they gain speed, they'll start using fewer shifts. Speed differential here, top speed almost 230 miles an hour down the back straight. Minimum speed about 190 miles an hour.
Looking back, 3rd place, Gil de Ferran, Dario Franchitti. Helio Castroneves just behind and beginning to close. The closest contest on the track right now. You saw Franchitti and his move earlier. It brought him up to this 4th position. Alex Tagliani, in the meantime, is starting to move, coming up through the field, now to 7th. So the first laps are now complete at the Euro Speedway. Kenny Brack jumped into the lead on lap 1 and is making history with every lap. Back at the Euro Speedway, Germany, Kenny Brack is still the leader. We're watching that battle between Gil de Ferran and Dario Franchitti. Nothing has changed since we left you, but these two are beginning to fight very hard.
We talked about movers through the field. We mentioned Zanardi and a few of the others. Oriol Servia has come up from 20th place to 13th on those first opening laps. So a very strong performance there. This is a track because of the limited track time where drivers will be a larger percentage of the overall performance package. The engineers, a little smaller percentage.
There is Oriol Servia. In fact, even with the limited track time, it wasn't the world's greatest example of what they could do because of the limited track time. Nobody was really trying to go as fast as they could. They were just simply trying to understand everything.
Well, with rain predicted all the way through the weekend, the teams were scrubbing tires as fast as they could get them on the car in the opening sessions of that one session that we had on Friday. The drivers, as you said, working half to full tanks the entire time. We never saw anyone put on a sticker set of tires and just go for a time. Really no reason to. They realized they were going to grid by championship points. Really hurt some of the quick guys. I mentioned Morris Nunn's team, Zanardi and Kanaan, the quickest. One of the cars that have taken all the sponsorship, or one of the teams that have taken all the sponsorship off the car. And a few of these guys we should be seeing move up through this field very quickly.
Looking back from Gidley to a charging Servia. Servia on the last lap around pulled out and took a look at moving on him. Now he begins to close in, but still not quite enough.
Lola Chassis, Toyota with Gidley, Ford Cosworth behind Servia. Sigma team has shown a number of times this year that they have the potential to do very, very well. Oriol Servia, one of the drivers looking for a ride next year. Indy Lights champion, very talented, very smart. Hope he gets a ride with a good team.
You know, coming off of that corner as you watch Servia, his exit is much higher and much more open.
Yeah, he's using a lot more road there. He's not trying to hold the wheel in. He's trying to use it every inch of racetrack. The tighter you keep the steering or the lower you keep the car, the farther away from the wall, the more speed the tires will scrub. You've got to try to free up the car, make the radius of these corners as wide and as long as possible to take the maximum amount of speed through them. It's a matter of how close you want to get to the wall.
The other thing to remember here is they are running the carbon fiber brake system as another look to the inside, and this one comes from Pappas.
And you mentioned that we always allow that on super speedways because they're much lighter, and they also don't suddenly heat and shock cool like a cast iron rotor would, which would cause them, or we have seen them explode in the past. But the difference is at Fontana and Michigan, these guys never use the brakes. Here they're using the brakes for every single corner. Carbon fiber brakes do not respond well until they get heat in them. That's why they always have problems coming into the pits on the traditional super speedways. Here, though, those brakes can be very, very effective.
So now in terms of battles, Pappas working on Paul Tracy, gave you a glimpse of that. Servia continues to work on Gidley. And that battle is all now beginning to close down to become one giant battle with Bruno Junqueira kind of caught in the middle of the whole thing. So there is Gidley, there's Servia, there goes Junqueira. And right behind him comes Paul Tracy and then Max Pappas. Really lined up in that group in a six-way battle for 12th place. Tracy looks inside again.
We'll you'll notice that these cars aren't closing up on each other the way we would see at Michigan or Fontana. I alluded to a little earlier, there's an aerodynamic package specific for this track. They go back to a road course main plane on the rear wing instead of the Hanford device, and then they run a very large wicker, 1.5 inches. What's ended up happening is the cars have a lot more downforce than they normally would on the superspeedway and about the same amount of drag. So we're not getting all the turbulence that we would at those other tracks, but it's making the cars much more secure, plants them a lot better for the drivers, but we're also not, as a result, seeing that great big draft. So you'll notice the relative position of the cars changes very little between the corner exit and then at the end of the straightaway.
Watching the leader now, Kenny Brack beginning to come up on traffic for the first time today. Magnificent facility here. They've really done a lot of work on it. Now Brack moves around Max Wilson and begins to overhaul the rest of the field. Let's go again to Gary Gerould.
Paul, one of the things that's changed dramatically is the fact that it's now the warmest it's been at any time since these cars have been on the track. But the ambient temperature is only 67 degrees. We say only, that's cool by normal racing standards. The track temperature, amazingly, the Firestone engineers tell us, is now 75 degrees. But that is the highest track temperature they've seen thus far this weekend. That, to me, and maybe Parker, you can address that, is pretty amazing when you consider that many times we're racing with track temperatures of 115 to 125 degrees.
Gary, there's nothing more exciting than a driver showing up to a new venue because it's a chance to learn a new place. Maybe you're facing some new challenges, both personally and technically with the car. But certainly one of the things you don't want to face is a car that takes a long time to get up to speed at a place that you haven't spent a lot of time, years or thousands of miles learning, so that you can get away with certain things in certain places. So for all of these drivers, it's kind of leveled the playing field. We've seen from Kenny Brack in the past how brave he is. Same with Michael Andretti, Paul Tracy, how fast they can go on a brand new set of tires hanging on. And that's what we're seeing right now.
So now Franchitti moves around Michael Andretti, takes second place away, and starts a pursuit of Kenny Brack. 17 laps are now complete at Euro Speedway, about halfway to the first round of stops. We'll be back. Back at Euro Speedway in Germany, Paul Page, Parker Johnstone, Gary Gerould is not here, or is here. Nothing has changed since we left you. Not here, though, is Jan Beekes and a number of the kart officials and some team support members, and the reason is quite simple. At the time of the start of this race, have been no flights available from the United States to come here and be able to be part of this. And Jan, we do miss you. Gary Gerould.
Paul, a quick update on travel. It's interesting because Pat Patrick, the owner of the Patrick Racing Team, of course, and Jim McGee, his longtime lead team manager, they got cleared for a flight just hours literally ago. They flew from Detroit to Frankfurt, Frankfurt to Dresden. Last report we had just before the ceremonies began, they were on board a helicopter from Dresden and were hopeful of arriving at the track prior to the green flag. Talk about last-minute adjustments. They got here. Roger Penske is among those who hasn't been able to get here, along with Chip Ganassi and Bobby Rahal.
Battle for the lead now, as moving up is Dario Franchitti, trying to catch Kenny Brack, and he is right there. They're now all taking advantage of moving through the slower traffic of the field, as the leaders are now overhauling the back markers.
What Dario's going to do now, he obviously has a very strong car, a balance that he's pleased with. He's going to try to use one of these slower cars as a pick. Mauricio Gugelmin just in front of Kenny Brack. He's waiting to try to get Kenny Brack boxed in here so he can rely on the draft, even though it's a little bit reduced, try to outbrake him at the end of one of these straightaways, as Kenny has to slow down or loses his momentum coming into the corner, and there he goes.
Here comes Dario on the move to the inside. Kenny gets a little high coming off the corner. Dario comes to the inside. Drag race down one of the long straightaways here. They are all long, but Kenny is able to pull away. Still slower traffic just ahead.
One thing to notice there is Dario made his move to the inside. Kenny left a lane open on the bottom, so he didn't shut the air off on Dario's car. That was a very, very professional maneuver. Most guys would have just chopped him right off, taken the air off the car. Dario would have had to have lifted, would have slid high on the corner exit, would have lost a lot of time there.
Now joining that fight is Michael Andretti. Kenny Brack darts to the inside, then comes back out. They're all trying to get around Mauricio Guzman, and there'll be a lot of this now. Mileage, look at the speeds on the 22nd lap just completed with Breck as 195 miles an hour. And Andretti and DeFerrin, they are charging up. They had some open space and were drafting as well. Breck trying to get to the inside of Guzman. Now anybody looks for openings.
What's going to happen is Breck is looking in his mirrors. His spotters are telling him he's under enormous pressure from the cars behind. Look at Dario, look at Michael. He's really got to get this pass done. He tried it once on Mauricio. Mauricio closed the door. And what happens, your momentum tends to slow down and you start to assume the same pacing of the cars in front of you. And I've never seen, Paul, such a diverse time sheet where at the top we had Tony Kanaan doing a 34.2 lap or 210.3 miles an hour, and just a few places back the speeds dropped 5, 6, 7, 8 miles an hour. So a huge speed differential amongst these cars, something we haven't seen in a very long time in Champ Car racing.
First, second, and third right together, Breck, Franchitti, Andretti. Breck seems to want to run in the tire tracks of Kenny Breck, so whatever he does, he's going to dart with him and try to get in there. Michael seems to be wanting to move to a different line so that if something goes wrong up there, he'll have the move.
And now Breck, Franchitti, and Andretti have all slowed down to Mauricio's pace about 37.8 seconds. To put that in context, the cars behind him now, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, etc., all running in the mid to low 36s, so they will all catch them and very, very quickly, so they've got to make these passes.
Michael comes to the inside of Franchitti, and Michael Andretti takes second place, going now for the leader.
Michael just timed that move better. Dario got boxed in a little bit behind Mauricio. Michael was able to come off the corner with a little bit more speed, and now look at him go after Kenny Breck. Team Green obviously has found a great setup. These guys have adapted to this new track very, very quickly.
We're almost here seeing the scenario you normally see on a much shorter track, like a Milwaukee, because already we're on top of the back markers. They're trying to move through the field, and that's when the passes are going to get done, and they're going to come suddenly.
And unlike a traditional 2-mile superspeedway, these guys aren't going high, middle, or low, so the traffic really doesn't play that big of a factor except for the draft. Here, it looks like there's only one line down low through the corners. That's the only place anyone's run so far, so they haven't established a higher groove.
Let's go back down to the pits again. Gary Gerould.
Paul, in regards to that single line and single groove, I talked to many of the drivers just before the ceremonies and the command to get into the cars and said, is there room? Can you run the outside groove? And all to a man, the ones we talked to said, no, I don't think so. There's just not enough rubber down. We didn't have enough time on the track. So that's a concern, but I think it'll be something interesting to watch through the course of the event, especially because it's the warmest day thus far, if they can get rubber down, if we'll be able to see guys occasionally challenge on the outside through one of these 3 magnificent sweeping corners.
It's not a matter of track width. This is one of the widest tracks they run on. It's simply trying to get the rubber down on the high side of the groove to allow the drivers to feel comfortable to go up there and attempt the pass.
Franchitti is back up working on Michael Andretti as they come down the front straight once again. While this is going on, we're also keeping an eye on the Players Foresight team of Patrick Carpentier and Alex Tagliani, because they've been steadily moving forward. Carpentier is now up into 4th. Tagliani is 5th. There they are. And they seem to be helping one another, but now they're in a battle between themselves as they come up behind Mauricio Guzman.
The Players team have been on a roll now for race after race after race. They obviously now, instead of coming to a racetrack hoping that they do well, come to the racetrack expecting to do well. That has changed the confidence not only in these 2 young drivers of Carpentier and Tagliani, but every crew person on that team.
At the front, first, second, and third are strung out now, though still everybody in attack position. There's Kenny Breck, the leader. 30 the lap's going to be the number next time around. So as they try to work their way again through traffic with Breck in the lead, Andretti second, Franchitti third, and then Team Forsythe. We'll be back. Speedway, nothing has changed since we left you. It is still Tagliani and Carpentier battling with one another at the front of the field. Breck, Andretti, Franchitti trying to thread their way through traffic, but first through 5th are now all on the same straightaway with one another.
We're expecting pit stops in the next 10 laps, so a lot of these guys, if they can't get the passes done here, they're going to have to wait and rely on their crews to try to make those advances in the pits.
Shinji Nakano seems to be getting everybody a wide berth, letting the leaders come on through. Gugerman was a little more difficult when they came past him.
If you're a back marker, you're really going to fight on that first time that you're lapped, because if a yellow comes out and you've just let the leader by easily, you'll go a lap down. It's opposed to being able to work your way back onto that lead lap and pack up with everyone. So the first time they come through these guys, they will fight very, very hard to defend their position and not go a lap down. However, once you've gone a lap down, then when the leaders come up, you should just get out of the way.
As right there, well, now we're actually seeing a turn onto the pit road for the first time.
Saw Brian Herta diving down inside the pits. That's a little earlier than I would expect. I expect them to come in not for another 4 or 5 more laps. Some of these guys, if you remember Motegi, huge difference in fuel mileage. Some cars extending 10, 11, 12 laps farther than their competitors.
Brian Herta's crew has all tires laid out for him and fueled the car in what looks to be fairly routine service, but a little bit early. Well, Brian Herta is not happy with the car and sounds like he's getting ready to withdraw. In the meantime, Kenny Brack has managed to put a car between himself and second place Michael Andretti. And on pit road, Franchitti, Christian Fittipaldi. So the first stops of the day now beginning. And this will give us our first hint at how the pit strategy will in fact play out. We have been green all 33 laps to this point.
While we're watching the stop for Dario Franchitti earlier than we anticipated, Christian Fittipaldi comes up pit road after service. There was concern from John Jazanikis and the Newman Haas team that they would be struggling today, and clearly it has been an early struggle for Fittipaldi. The Newman Haas drivers just have not found a balance on their race cars today. They were almost 2 seconds slower than the fast pace being set by Morris Nunn's team, Zanardi and Kanaan. Meanwhile, we can tell you that Kenny Breck's crew now starting to limber up, picking up the air guns. They're getting ready to service their driver for the first time.
And the first time in pit stops, and these stops coming under the green as they exited onto the pit exit road, which actually rejoins the track beyond turn 1. We got a pretty good idea of how fast they can come up to speed, and it was about a 3/4 of a lap overall loss for Franchitti against Breck, who stayed out. Fernandez stops. Breck continues.
And just as we've seen in the past, Kenny Breck's not only fast, he gets great mileage, but now we're seeing all the Toyota and Honda competitors in. A lot of Ford competitors still out on the track.
Well, Michael Andretti in the pits. This on lap 35. The stop started on 33. Herta has climbed out of his car as expected. And still Kenny Breck stays out. Right here, this could be a very important factor for this run.
Absolutely. Of the 5 races so far this year, this young man has dominated. Laps led, all the stats on ovals. Castroneves now coming in. He was hanging in there with Breck, the highest placed Honda runner. And Breck is going fast and making great mileage.
And just ahead of Castroneves, you saw Townsend Bell, identical car to Jimmy Vasser. Gary?
Watching from the back of Helio Castroneves' car, not a lot of brake dust on this first stop. Everything appears to be routine. Helio was concerned about whether or not they'd be able to pass. He's got a great stop, 10.7 seconds on my clock. As we watch others roll by, including Gugelman, Zanardi, Max Verstappen's out. We still await Kenny Breck getting great fuel mileage.
And because of pit positioning for Castroneves right down at the exit, he snaps it out into traffic and then can hammer it pretty quickly on that access road coming through turn 1. Here comes Paul Tracy. Tracy coming out of 6th place. Routine service here. Nice and smooth for Team Green. And Tracy goes back into the fight. The report on Brian Herta's problem is that it was an electrical problem that took him out of the race. Kenny Breck still stays out.
Now he's coming in.
You know, the question you got to ask is, obviously he's going to make it to the pits now, but how good, with just 2 hours and 20 minutes of practice, is your mileage data here? That was a pretty big risk.
I think that's a lot of what they worked on, but he was able to go 4 or 5 laps farther than the guys in the top group. So that's a very impressive run from Kenny Brack. We'll see how happy he is with the car as he comes in.
So waiting for Kenny Brack is Gary Gerould.
Well, most of the team managers we talked to said there wouldn't be a problem getting 2.3 miles per gallon on this racetrack. Kenny Brack obviously doing better than that, it would appear. They finish off the servicing. The revs are up. He's moving. We're under 11 seconds. Everything routine. Oh, a little wiggle there as he went off the concrete onto the asphalt, but he controlled it nicely.
Scott Dixon came in from second place. Hasn't had, he gives it a twist too. They're all, as they come off of that concrete and getting onto the asphalt, having to catch the back end. It doesn't become any more than that. Dixon only had about 20 minutes of track time total, as the leader of the race, Servia, who picked up the lead of the race, would become the last car in. But Scott Dixon had some sort of might have been food poisoning. They didn't know, but he was very sick, couldn't go out during the only full practice that they had, and got about 25 minutes in the car in the morning warm-up. And working on Cristiano D'Amata's car. And we saw them before the start of the engines with the cooling off, Parker. Gary Gerould?
Well, we understand that there's something that may be gearbox related. It's at the opposite end of the pits from where we're positioned right now. We'll try to get a confirmation on that, but appears to be gearbox, and they indicated on the radio that they were in fact done for the event. So that's a tough break for the guy whose season started so brilliantly with that victory at Monterrey, Mexico.
Well, as we watch Kenny Brack reassuming the lead on the last lap, they were working though on the car still and working on the left side pod, and that doesn't sound like what they're really worried about is gearbox. Well, on the other hand, during the practice yesterday, Christian Fittipaldi had a gearbox problem that stopped his practice very early. We'll be back. Welcome back to Euro Speedway, the German 500, Lausitz, Germany, about 30 miles outside of the incredibly picturesque town of Dresden. Community undergoing some tremendous regrowth and rebuilding. They're getting many of their beautiful buildings refurbished now. Just a joy to walk down the streets of Dresden. Beautiful countryside here too. Out at the Euro Speedway, enormous views off to the west. And Kenny Brack has the best view of everybody. The view of looking out the front of that car over the nose and knowing that he is in the lead, and handled up the field pretty well early on. Let's go to Gary Gerould. Update report on Cristiano, Gary.
For Cristiano D'Amata, back out. They just changed the coils on the race car. It was an electronics-related problem, apparently not gearbox-related. He's under power and is back out. We'll see how it performs. So he's still soldiering on. Meanwhile, the problem for Bryan Herta ended up being a situation where he lost battery and voltage. That's what knocked Herta out of the race.
So that explains the electrical on Herta. It'll be disappointing to come this far, work this hard, go through this much emotion, and find yourself forever in the record books as the first car retired from the first race here in Continental.
Well, but you did call it right there, and I agree with the emotions and everything that's happened this past week. That's got to be just such a huge disappointment. But on Cristiano D'Amata, you're absolutely right. Had to be something electrical. They're looking underneath the side pods. But I want to get back about the gearbox issues. People say, how can you damage a gearbox when you're only shifting 4 to 6 times a lap, is what we see on some road courses where they're shifting well over 30 times a lap.
They're big deal shifts.
Well, they're very big deal shifts here. And there's very small difference between max RPMs and minimum RPMs as they enter the corners. Just one little nick on the downshift, if they don't get the revs just right, and they need to rev very, very little here, you can then start to chip away on those dog rings, and the gearbox can be destroyed very, very quickly.
And Cristiano's still in the cockpit, and they're still doing some work. Are they trying to get him in or out?
He's coming out.
Yeah, you would assume with what they had to say that he was definitely coming out of the car.
Came into the race 7th in the championship. It's the first of our top 10 championship contenders to drop out, and his year has just after, as Gary said, after that brilliant opening win at Monterrey, Mexico, has just continued to go downhill. Most of it way beyond Cristiano's control, just being in the wrong place at the wrong time or mechanical failures.
On the first round of stops beginning on lap 33, here is the pit summary with Carpentier and Kanaan and Oriol Servia all getting an advantage during those stops, picking up positions.
Well, Oriol Servia, the last car to come into the pits, got the best mileage of anyone and the biggest mover in the field, coming from 20th starting position up to now currently running 9th.
At the same time, early contenders Andretti and Franchitti suffering some problems, not able to get out in the field, not so much from the stop itself because all the stops were clean and good. The problem was more how you got in and out of the traffic.
Well, and we saw Franchitti at the beginning of the race just very, very strong right at the front, but as these tires wear, as the fuel load decreases and these cars chassis start to change handling characteristics, it can only be in a lap or two where a driver says, man, I've got a great car, and all of a sudden you've used every adjustment, sway bars, weight jackers, everything that you can do, and all of a sudden the car is very difficult to drive. So I think they may have brought Dario in early. He may have caught some traffic and the car was deteriorating quick enough. It's just better to bring him in early and get those changes made.
And so Gary Gerould, now Cristiano Damata is out of the car. Calm down a little bit. What's going on?
Cristiano, was it gearbox related or was it electronics?
Well, at first I thought it was the engine, but we checked everything. Engine was fine. I think it's something related to the transmission. I'm not sure if it's gearbox or some other piece.
What were the track conditions like? Do you like this new layout here?
No, they're great. Track conditions are great. There's a lot of grip. The track's very clean, even though it's only had two and a half hours of practice before the race started. But it's a nice track.
Thank you.
Well, Cristiano Damata becomes the second out of competition. We may see the same thing out of Adrian Fernandez. Culling comes off of that car, second time in for Fernandez.
Fernandez so frustrated this year in 14 races. He's DNF'd 8 times. This new team, as of late, has been coming on very, very strong. Good performances in qualifying and race performances, but the DNFs are killing him.
Michael Andretti now closing on Patrick Carpentier for second place. And they have slower traffic just ahead. First one they'll encounter will be Jimmy Vasser. Vasser and Townsend Bell driving nearly identical Visteon cars, bright orange cars. The way you have to look besides the helmet to tell the difference is on the nose of the car. There's some brown markings on the front wing set, the winglets on the front nose of Townsend Bell's car.
And there's also black rear wing end plates on Townsend's car as well. But this team was put together very, very quickly with Dale Coyne's guys, brought in all the pit equipment. They're just not allowed to change the Toyota motors because they have associations with Cosworth. But other than that, these guys have been working very well.
They go too wide right behind Gidley as Kenny Brack continues in front. Carpentier now second. We'll be back. Back at Euro Speedway, Brack, Carpentier, Michael Andretti, the top three, then Tagliani, Dario Franchitti, and now Tony Kanaan. Don't forget, second place Carpentier, the winner of the Michigan 500. They are all having to work their way through traffic now. And that's going to be the key throughout this day to how you will make your passes with whomever it is that you're racing with. Franchitti working with Moreno, but Moreno down in the field, but still Franchitti's got to get that position before his next closest competitor, who is Kanaan, also fighting the same problem with a slower car, can get around and close up on him. Let's go to Gary.
And Paul, for Adrian Fernandez, they just put the bodywork back on the car, topped off the fueling. The car is now running. It was shut down earlier. Remember, we reported a misfire in the very early laps. They came in and changed some of the electronic parts. Adrian said it just wouldn't run. Now they've got it powered up. He's back out.
You know, that was interesting, though. The last thing they did was pull the data dump line off the car. You don't normally see them pulling data during a stop.
Well, they're obviously looking at the telemetry, trying to go through all the engine channels to absolutely verify or analyze what the problem or problems might be. As you said, that's very unusual, but with that lengthy of a pit stop, they realize at this point they're just trying to get back on the track and hopefully salvage some point somehow.
what you see here, you know, we talk constantly about the telemetry on the cars, and they do have real-time telemetry and a nice, fancy signal hopping technique for secure communications that first developed by the military. And yet you can get a great deal of information on telemetry. You can get a great deal more if you merely hook the cable up. So that's they wanted to know something pretty remote.
Just transfer rate, number of channels that are being transferred, I assume. But they absolutely want it. If the car's down for that long and they're changing boxes, electronic control units, coils, whatever they might do, on these cars, usually the coil is a one piece into the spark plug connector, so every cylinder has its own coil. You don't know what was just changed, but obviously they want to verify and further diagnose if this problem continues. Oh, look at Gidley looking in his mirror. He knows he's coming by.
And not just by, it's like, so long.
It's bye-bye.
Gidley now down in 18th. Paul Tracy beginning to come forward. And Alex Zanardi is now up to 8th. There you see him noted, just 17 seconds back from the leader, Kenny Brack. 87,689. The reported attendance here today.
We had 21,500 on Thursday, almost 40,000 on Friday. And the thing that I noticed, Paul, is almost all of these spectators who are used to Formula One type events were just absolutely amazed that they could walk down, see the cars, talk to the drivers, get autographs. A lot of the spectators said, hey, I know we got rained out on Thursday, but the price of the ticket was worth the admission just to have the access.
Alex Zanardi's really flying now. We just mentioned him. He just got around DeFerrin moving into 7th place, but look at the laps that he was laying down there.
And we just want to say once again, one of 3 teams, Mo Nunn's team, that have taken all the commercial sponsorship off the car, with the exception of just 1 or 2, as a memorial to this particular event and the people back home. Very, very classy operation. Kanaan and Zanardi, the quickest guys in the one-time open practice session on Friday afternoon. And it's good to see that Zanardi is back, and he's just been ripping through the field. Started way back today, and he has just been going forward ever since. Started 22nd.
Brian Herta, we mentioned out of the race. The reason given is electrical. Gary Gerould is now with him. Gary?
Brian, tell us about your impressions of what, through the emotions of this week, to come and then have the early disappointment with the electronic problems or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a disappointment for us, but you know, I think the events of this week, like you said, they've put everything in perspective, and you know, it really doesn't seem like that big a deal right now. Just, you know, just want to tell everybody back home that we've been thinking about them all week, and you know, especially my family, my kids, Callie and Colton. Mommy, Daddy, miss you. We love you, and we'll see you soon.
For a driver, those opening ceremonies, was it emotionally moving to you and your team?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, you know, I feel like you don't have much emotion left after this week, to be honest. And, you know, the ceremonies were great, but what I've even been more surprised about is how warm, from being over here in Europe, how warm the German people have been towards Americans and expressing their sympathy. And you know, so it's hard to make a positive out of what happened, but, you know, at least I'd like to send the message home that the folks here in Germany have been right there with us and been very, very good to us this week.
Thank you, Brian. And Paul, we might add, the Prime Minister came to the track this morning, spent considerable time here. He brought with him a booklet that was signed by thousands of residents from this area, brought flowers. Many of the teams had them on their cars earlier. The support of the German people has been unbelievably strong this week.
And Gary, while you and Brian Herta have been chatting there, Oriol Servia and Paul Tracy have been putting on a magnificent demonstration of high-speed racing. Tracy comes back, Servia comes back at him, then Tracy comes back again, and now Oriol Servia's dropped back a bit, and that immediately brings him under the attention of the current 12th place occupant, Max Pappas. Now look here on our onboard camera on Dixon's car. That is the ribbon that everyone is wearing at the track, but also has been attached by way of decal to remember the tragedies of September 11th. Kenny Brack still leading, 62 laps complete for the leader. Brack followed by Carpentier and Andretti. Leader, no changes in the field. It's followed by Carpentier and Michael Andretti. Then Alex Tagliani and Dario Franchitti. Those are the top 5. Add in Kanaan, you've got the top 6, and there they are. Brian Herta was talking about the hospitality a few moments ago of the German people here, and it truly has been amazing. Whoa! Breck's in trouble, and he catches it, loses it again.
Watch it. There you go. You're okay. Get back on the track. Let's go. There you go. Go.
Well, it gets a yellow, though.
Pack up and blend. You're going to be okay.
It gets a yellow.
That was some pretty fantastic driving, doing 185, 190 miles an hour. Big sideways, little bit of a tank slapper there coming off it, but making the transition from grass over the curb back onto the asphalt. You need some very quick hands and great anticipation in order to catch a 1,500-pound car at 190 miles an hour. That was a good bit of driving there.
Oh, Kenny Breck this year is oval man in the series. He's unbelievable. Here it is again, coming down the pit straight,
coming down
turn 1.
Coming down to the first corner, you can see they just contact wheels. He thinks he's got the inside open, almost has secondary contact, just about gets it collected over the curb. The back end steps out, gets it lined up with the out lane there. You can see going down the inside. You know, the problem is you're raised on road courses. A lot of the European drivers, if they haven't spent a lot of time on ovals, they get to a corner and say, I've got the line, I'm going for the apex. Kenny has spent a lot of time on ovals compared to, say, Juno Bronquera. And what ends up happening is your mindset is you can go side by side through these corners, but the guys have got to give you a little bit of room. Junqueira comes down to the inside. Kenny's not anticipating it. He figures, hey, I'm going by a back marker. Doesn't get the pass stuck. So, I mean, he's got the right front hung out with the left rear. Junqueira gets bumped, but does just a great job of saving it.
And Townsendville gets a firm initiation into the world of the Champ Cars. And with all of that, and Scott Remke's coaching on the radio, hold it, catch it there. Okay, go on it, go for the racetrack. He only loses 1 position. We mentioned Kenny Breck on ovals. He's very powerful. Scoring his first win this year, but look overall.
And the thing this doesn't tell you is in one of the other races he finished second, which was at Nazareth behind Scott Dixon in his first win. And of course there was the Michigan race where he and his teammate Max Pappas were so strong until they made contact. Potentially he could have won all 5 of this year's oval races.
On the 65th lap, I'm guessing pretty close to the stop window.
I'm looking at this now, about another 10 or so laps, Paul. I think it's going to be very close.
You don't want to stop under the caution, huh?
Well, of course you would.
Okay. We'll be back with more from Euro Speedway. Parker Johnstone, Gary Gerould, Jan Bikas not able to make it out of the country to join us, but our 3-man team working here. Patrick Carpentier with the misstep by Kenny Breck picks up the lead. We are still under the caution for that, and everybody makes a quick turn for the pit road. So just like Parker says, yeah, I've got a caution. I'm 65 laps out. Let's go get some fuel.
And this is where the crews, where the teamwork really is so important, because this is where they'll pick up spots for you that you may not be able to make on the track.
So as the entire field looks like now, there's going to be a couple that are going to stay out, but a good portion of the field comes into the pits led by Patrick Carpentier. Kenny Breck very shortly will be making his turn in, and Gary Gerould is there.
Everybody in the leaders at the pit exit, the Players team, the Marlboro team, now the Rahal team in possession. Kenny Breck has been serviced. A great stop. He's out ahead of everybody except either Carpentier or Tagliani. A brilliant stop for Kenny Breck.
Well, it was Carpentier that got out ahead of him. The Forsythe team had picked the last pit positions for both Tagliani and Carpentier. And just a few seconds after Breck started to move, Carpentier suddenly lit up and got out just ahead of Breck. Michael Andretti going to come out there sitting in 3rd place. And then Tagliani. So now with the 2nd round of stops complete, we should go green very shortly. For the Rockingham 500K, brand new race there as well, another brand new track. For more, log on to ESPN.com. Well, back now at the Euro Speedway. Kenny Breck, Patrick Carpentier been battling, And on the last round of pit stops, Carpentier is able to roll out just a little ahead of everyone else. There's Michael Andretti, currently set up as third, Tagliani as fourth. And during that last round of stops, Servia picked up 3 positions, but Franchitti continues to lose positions. He lost 2 more on this round of stops.
Remember, on that first round of stops, the Sigma Autosport team picked up 2 positions for Servia. Now they've picked up an additional 3. These guys are just amazing for a very small single car team. And the big teams, as you said, Franchitti and Tracy both losing positions. And that's where this teamwork is so very important. One of the things I did want to explain, we saw cars staying on the track as the leaders came in. Just for new fans that are viewing, you'll see that the lead lap cars come in first, and then on the next lap, the lapped cars come in.
This is how Kenny Brack got in trouble. Off the course, catches it. Looked like just a little tap with Junqueira before, and then just drives on, loses 1 position.
That was an interesting perspective. You could see on the way in, Kenny was side by side. I mean, he had the entry of the corner, then realized that Bruno was coming down. You can see him stand on the brakes. The back end steps out. These cars aren't meant to brake hard mid-corner, obviously. And he does a great job. One of the terms I use, tank slappers. I've seen people on the internet saying, you didn't hit a tank. What are you talking about? It's a racing term that both motorcyclists and car racers use. It comes from motorcycling when the back end's moving around and your hands literally slap the tank with low bars. Well, you're not going to say this is a driver-induced multiple oversteer skid with the back end going back and forth, so we just call them tank slappers.
Driver-induced multiple.
I know, you're going to get me, aren't you? Okay. So watch once again as they come down to the corner. Kenny Brack to the left on the inside. Right here, he's got this pass made. Now look how hard he is on the brakes, because this is a long view of this. We can't see that he's side by side. He just stands on the brakes when he realizes Bruno is not going to hold the higher line. They touch, Kenny catches it. That was pretty spectacular, only losing 1 position.
With 85 laps left to go in the run, we're still a few laps away from the green flag at Euro Speedway before an enormous crowd. Stand's not completely full, but I got a feeling next year won't be any question about it. Carpentier, Brack, Andretti, Tagliani, Kanaan, Zanardi, then Franchitti, and Servia, Gildefer, and Castroneves. That's the top 10. Euro Speedway, Patrick Carpentier, the winner of this year's Michigan 500, has the lead over Kenny Brack and Michael Andretti as we're ready to go back green flag racing.
One of the concerns for Kenny Brack is when you take a wild ride through the grass, and he may have slowed down to 130, 140 miles an hour, and you actually saw that car getting up off the ground. The undertrays of these cars, the carbon fiber underwings, are very, very fragile. They're not meant for off-road excursions. You have to be concerned that something was broken or knocked out of line. See Kenny giving his traditional little wiggle there as he comes up to speed. They're about ready to go green.
So as Carpentier leads them onto the front straightaway under the twin pedestrian bridges and back to the green flag. Field through 1 onto the second straight. Carpentier got a good start, but Brack was right there with him. Tagliani taking a look at Michael Andretti. Franchitti and Servia.
Pappas and Tracy.
Here is Pappas on the outside.
This is very reminiscent of the battle we saw earlier with Tracy and Servia. The problem is here is if you go in early and hard and outbrake the guy, you end up taking in too much speed into the corner. The car washes up high. The guy that you've just passed gets a better exit, and he simply repasses you going back into the next corner. And we saw both driving styles exhibited when Tracy and Servia were doing that, but it now looks like Tracy's taking the upper hand.
Tagliani and Kanaan are 4th and 5th right now. Beginning to talk with one another. Once again, on a number of these cars, entirely different livery than you would normally see. Livery, the fancy word for paint job.
Absolutely. We talked about the Mo Nunn cars.
Oh, look at
Tony Kanaan goes through.
Oh.
You can see he's got no limits on the side. Very few sponsorship. We also mentioned the Penske's at the beginning of the show. Just a first-class organization as Mo Nunn is. And then, of course, there's Derek Walker. Toro Takagi's car, absolutely bare commercial sponsorship, except for the American flag. There is an American flag displayed on the side pod, the only detail on the entire car.
In the case of Penske, they already had some of the sponsorship off the car, but then they ask other sponsors, could we remove as much as we can? And I think a lot of that inspired here, interestingly enough, by the example set by Ferrari, who said they were removing all of their commercial sponsors for the car, considering the tragedy in the United States.
Well, you know, Paul, as well as I do, how heavily this weighed on the hearts of everyone here. The crews here, they are the backbone of this organization. They're the guys that get the least amount of recognition. They work the longest hours for the least amount of money. And these guys were just overcome all week long. And I think anything they could do to show support for home, including spending late hours last night pulling decals off cars, they'll do anything. They want to be home. They can't be there, as we all know. And racing is what they do and what they know. But it's amazing, the class and the strength and the ability of these crews. And it's just heart-touching.
Tony Kanaan coming up to work on Kenny Breck now. Remember, led 40 laps in Japan. You know, it's interesting because all of us, I think, said, let's just get racing. Because I don't think anybody is sleeping here. Everyone is watching television constantly to find out what the latest news is. It takes sometimes a great deal of time to call home and reach someone, especially if they're in the Northeast United States. And so there was some belief that everyone would become a little more relaxed and some tension would go away once this race got going. I'm certainly feeling that for the moment, but the exhaustion is still very much here for everyone. Nothing, of course, compared to what's going on in the United States, though. We can only guess. Kanaan closes on Breck. Goes to the inside. Whoa, that was very decisive. Can he let him go? I don't think so.
Why, Tony came off the last corner just with a huge head of steam. Look at him look at the mirror. Look down to the left side, trying to figure out where Kenny is. He just got a great exit coming off the third corner, drafted up behind Kenny, and just stuck the pass on the way in. I mean, no one passes Kenny Breck easily, and Tony made it look easy. And now look at him go. Mo Nunn's outfit has got this track figured out, and their drivers want to prove that they're as good as everyone thinks they are.
Now in Kanaan's sights is the leader, Patrick Carpentier. In the meantime, let's go to Gary Gerould.
Quick update from the Rahal pit. Scott Remke on the radio to Kenny Breck telling him that's the mileage we need. So that would tell me that he's trying to run a fuel race right now. They're trying to get to one more stop to be able to go the distance. Of course, we don't know what will happen with any yellows, but that may be why he gave up that position so easily, or why Kanaan was able to seemingly blow by on that pass.
Patrick Carpentier, Tony Kanaan, Kenny Breck. A look back here, though, as Alex Zanardi is now working on Michael. Two former series champions. They go wheel to wheel, and side by side, Zanardi goes past. Zanardi, who was the fastest in the practice, not just by a little, but by a ton. He was flying. They figured it out, and figured it out early on. Unfortunately, he didn't have the points to get him starting up in the front, since they were starting here on the point lineup coming into the race, qualifying having been canceled. But Zanardi is now showing that what he had and displayed in practice is still there.
And that's what we said a little earlier. It was so unusual to see this grid so split apart, where you've got miles and miles per hour between just the first, second, third, fourth, fifth place car. These guys were a couple miles an hour faster than anybody else.
Carpentier now under attack by Tony Kanaan. Kenny Breck fades a little. Very soon he's going to see Zanardi in his mirrors. And the yellow comes out. No indication up.
Tora Takagi.
Light those tires, Tora. And Takagi off course, quickly back on, but it does bring out the second caution of the day. And for the moment, holds off Kanaan's attack on Carpentier.
Now we're going to see some pit strategy play out.
You bet
I've been doing some math after Gary brought up possibly going one more stop with Kenny Breck, and it is possible. They need this yellow, but now I think we're going to see strategies go two different directions.
Well, here's what happened to Tora Takagi.
He and Bruno got together. It looked like Tora had the low line, was where he was supposed to be, and Bruno apparently has been wanting some action and is finding it, but unfortunately the resulting action is involving everyone else. It's one of the times I can say Toro was just minding his own business, was down low doing what he was supposed to, and just got clipped as Bruno came back down to the inside, just like he had done on Kenny Brack.
Takagi, another one of those who is carrying the American flag rather than sponsor on the side of the car. The crew is laid out with equipment for Bruno Junqueira. We'll be back with more from Germany. Weeknights, 6 p.m. Finally got themselves into a nice little niche time there, 3 p.m. Pacific. For more, log on to ESPN.com. Still under the yellow, you ride with Gidley. Carpentier is the leader, followed by Kanaan, Kenny Brack, Alex Zanardi, and Michael Andretti. Those are the top 5. But the pits are now open. And now we're going to see some strategy.
Lead lap cars in, lapped cars have to remain out until the pits are open for them. And now it's all up on the shoulders of the crews once again.
Carpentier, Kanaan, they stay out. Both of the Ganassi cars are coming in. That surprises me a little bit. You'd think you'd want to split them.
Well, that's why we're in the booth, and
exactly.
They're down there making the
I'm not running any teams this year, or any year. Franchitti in, fuel only. Gary Gerould, Elio Castroneves.
We thought he was going to pit. Everybody was over the wall. We were looking up the line. We saw Michael Andretti peel out, then Dario Franchitti. And at that point, the Penske team brought their equipment. Both Ganassi cars go by. Takagi is back out. And at pit exit, they'll form up at the back of the pack. So no stop here for either the Penske cars, either of the players' cars, either of the Rahal cars.
So under the track, under the caution, it's Carpentier, then Morris Nunn's driver Tony Kanaan, then Kenny Brack driving for Bobby Rahal, and then the second Morris Nunn car. Pretty impressive here. We haven't seen anything near that this year out of Morris Nunn.
And once again, though, this race will be determined by chance. Which strategy is correct? We'll find out.
And for Michael Andretti, it was fuel only, guys. No change on the tires. I don't know if you saw that.
Carpentier, Kanaan, Brack, 1, 2, 3. Now, watch this. Aha. The Rahal guys aren't real happy with Junqueira as he comes in. So now behind the pace car once again as the folks here in Europe get a taste of oval racing American style. We'll be back. 100 at Euro Speedway, ready to go green again. Carpentier, Kanaan, Kenny Brack, and then Alex Zanardi, the top 4. Morris Nunn Racing with 2 cars in the top 4 and looking very strong. Anticipating one more stop for everybody. So the strategy that may have been gained for stopping under that yellow, who knows? Unless, of course, we get another yellow that is properly positioned.
Well, according to the calculations, everyone's going to have to stop one more time. We saw guys come in, some didn't pick up tires, but it's all going to come down to track position on this final stop when it happens, whether it's under yellow or under green.
Speed begins to pick up for Patrick Carpentier. Tony Kanaan is right there with him. So is Brack. And for that matter, so is Zanardi. Moving a little further back in the field. Pappas comes to the inside, while at the same time, moved to the outside by Tagliani.
Servia, we've got to talk about this young man. Came out in 6th place out of the pits, and he is all over the back of Tagliani.
At the same time, DeFerrin and Tracy battle just a little further back.
Oh.
Tracy gets way up high. Castroneves tries to take advantage of that one.
That was a big move coming off a corner at 190 miles an hour.
So Pappas on the restart breaks out of that group, gets away from DeFerrin, Tracy, and Castroneves. And now Tracy wants out of there.
Scott Dixon looking down the inside of Gidley.
Goes side by side, wheel to wheel with Gidley. Carpentier still the leader, but he's not really pulling away. At the same time, Kenny Brack coming under attack by Alex Zanardi. Zanardi's just been steadily picking him up, finds himself eventually in the top 10, then the top 5, now running 4th.
12-lap difference in those who pitted and those who didn't. What that means, if you know you've got to go that one more stop regardless, the guys that just came in, they've got it cranked all the way up. Full fuel, full ignition advance. they're going to be on the button all the time. They're not really concerned about mileage. The rest of the group, the guys that didn't pit, they're going to have to be a little bit more conservative with their fuel strategy. It's going to be very interesting now that we're well past the halfway point.
A couple of weeks ago in Vancouver, I said to Alex Zanardi, I said, Alex, you know, I apologize. I haven't been able to mention you nearly as much as I would have liked. And typical Zanardi, he said, Paul, I haven't deserved the mentioning, but I will get better, and we will do better before the end of this season. And then again, typical Zanardi went on for about 30 minutes on that.
See, the answer he gave to me is thank you for not mentioning me so far this season.
He's a great guy. One of the great, I mean, they're all so much fun.
You know, and it's been difficult to watch this year because we remember the championship years for Zanardi and his engineer at the time with Chip Ganassi Racing, Roy Nunn. We hope that that magic was rekindled. Morris Nunn in a different position this year, trying to be a team owner, an engineer, putting this team together for 2 cars, expanding it from Tony Kanaan. A lot going on there. They were hoping...
Zanardi right past Breck. And now Morris Nunn Racing runs 2nd and 3rd.
The team was hoping for a little bit more Alex. Alex was hoping for a little bit more Morris, and maybe we're seeing it now as Kenny comes back.
And he's going to try it back to the inside. There's that same exchange that we've seen a number of times here. And Zanardi comes off the corner high once again, looking for the momentum to try to come back at him.
But you saw the difference with that pass with 2 very experienced oval drivers. Even though they were born and raised on road courses, Kenny came down the inside, Zanardi left him the low lane and continued to drive around the middle to high side. He didn't try to pinch him off, didn't try to take the classic road racing line and come down to the apex.
Now the battle for the lead, Tony Kanaan working on Carpentier. Carpentier tries to shake him loose. On the pit straight now, they come into turn 1.
Kanaan is good at 3. Kanaan is fast at 3.
Now on to the pit straight. Take a little while to figure some of these out, isn't it?
Well, these corners are each a little bit different. Even it's not exactly a perfect triangle. About 5 to 6 degrees of banking on the entry. It increases as they go through the corner to 7 degrees. Each of the corners are a little different. They're in turn 1 for 6.5, 6.8 seconds. And then that varies from corner to corner. They get down to turn 2, they're only there for 5.5 seconds. Turn 3, about the same as turn 1 as far as duration, but they drive a little differently. My laps earlier in the week looked a lot like Motegi's turns 3 and 4, the old Pocono track, but you can see that the car can be a little better in one corner and maybe not quite as good in the other 1 or 2, and that's what we're seeing from Tony Kanaan. He's very good off the last corner, which is why he's been able to outbrake and make these passes going into turn 1.
It always is a compromise. Breck goes low into the corner. Zanardi goes a little wide. Positions remain the same, but Zanardi and Breck are running a little bit faster than Kanaan and Carpentier, and therefore catching him.
Zanardi
closes. Oh, what a nice move.
He's really strong right now. He's just got a much better car at this point. But we don't know, once again, if it's that combination of chassis and or fuel position selection right now.
Kanaan goes for the lead. Down to the inside. Carpentier gives him the room. Coming on the stretch, they're going to go side by side.
Tony Kanaan, I have to say this, had it by a nose, but not now.
Kenny's right there. Alex is right there.
Zanardi's right there, too. First, second, and third all right together. Carpentier, then Kanaan, then Zanardi.
A big wiggle from Carpentier coming off that corner. But we could see something we haven't seen in a very long time. It's 2 cars side by side for all the way from entry, mid-corner, and exit. Carpentier, obviously very expensive.
Kanaan may have him now as Kanaan moves to the inside, darts out of the draft of Carpentier, takes the lead of the race. Now here is Zanardi to move on Carpentier.
That time, Kanaan came off the second corner much better, and now here comes Zanardi.
Zanardi inside of Carpentier, Zanardi to second. Morris Nunn cars run first and second. Carpentier in just 2 laps drops to position. Now Breck working on Carpentier, and Kenny Breck is by.
Boy, and that can show you how fast the chassis can change. Carpentier was doing a great job at the point. The car obviously getting very loose and looser in just a few laps, and now he's just hanging on. He's got a long wait till this next round of stops, and it looks like people are just training by him.
Well, there's a question as a matter of strategy now. You can't really come in trying to get this whole
Well, if it's bad enough, you really should. I learned that in the past, that you can hang on, make all the adjustments you can, but if this car gets loose enough, the smart thing is just to come in and make the changes. You know you've got to make one more stop. You just have to hold on until that window opens up.
The two former winners of the Michigan 500, Tony Kanaan and Patrick Carpentier, have been up at the front. Right now, it's Kanaan Zanardi for Morris Nunn Racing. Back at Lausitz, Germany, Euro Speedway. Tony Kanaan is the leader, but now he's going to have to start working through traffic. Before getting to the traffic, and in the last few minutes, he's pulled out a bit from his teammate Zanardi, 1.5 seconds. Breck is back another 1.5 from Zanardi, and then Carpentier back another second. Kanaan clears the first traffic easily, and Zanardi stays right there with him. Gary Gerould, what has Morris Nunn, the team owner, think? He's running 1-2 for the first time this
Morris,
year.
What can you tell us about this sudden emergence? What have you found? What's making you so fast, so strong today?
Well, we're not doing anything different than we've done at any other race, so maybe the bad setup we had and the rest of the circuits works on this one.
Are there any team orders here?
No, not at all.
Each man for himself.
They both want to win our first race for us.
You want to win that too, huh?
Sure, I don't mind.
Oh, it's great to see the smile on this man's face after all the hard work and the early frustration.
Yeah, you know, I was about to make the comment, the glowing buildup, that as we take a look at the fast laps of the day, and they are all Morris Nunn Racing, but I was going to make Morris Nunn out to be the brilliant engineer and the man who engineered the victories for Zanardi and everyone at Target Chip Ganassi, and then he's now even using the same setup.
Well, thank goodness he made me laugh. It's the bad setup may be working here. These guys have worked so hard, just as everyone does, but here's a team with so much potential. As we've said now a few times, they were so much quicker than anyone else in practice, and now they're demonstrating that during the race. I guess there's only one team order, though. Don't run into each other.
Zanardi 1.8 back. It's no distance at all really here. 102 laps now complete. Working on lap 103. So let's think a bit. There's a couple of guys that are out of sequence on fuel. It's been a fairly painless race. No contacts with the wall. Two quick little off-on incidents. A bit of a surprise for a speedway, super speedway, that this would be contrived. So if Kanaan, who should be in very quickly here, another 2 or 3 laps, what about these guys that are out of sequence? It seems to me that they're just out to lunch.
Well, we've got Andretti Franchitti, Takagi, Junqueira. Oh, we go down the list. Dixon, Vassar, and the rest will then come to the front as these guys pit. And everyone's going to have to make one more stop. So
logically, these guys,
well, then
barring anything else, come back to the front again, somewhere fairly close to the finish. 154 laps, the scheduled distance, 50 of them to go.
And in that the 2-hour practice we had on Friday, the half hour this morning, we saw, for the first time that I can remember, a very long time, no contact with the walls anywhere, just some minor problems. So obviously the design of this track, the banking, the width, etc., is allowing the drivers to test the limits combined with this new aero package, get a good feel for the car, and then use their skill to keep the cars off the walls, as opposed to getting in and all of a sudden the car just takes off and there's very little they can do. We've seen the guys now slide the cars a number of times. They're not quite as sensitive of getting to that critical sideways angle where all of a sudden they lose everything and the car just essentially is on its own without any response from the driver.
Tagliani was able to get around Carpentier. He's trying to stay in touch with the leaders of the race. Next ahead of him on scoring is Kenny Breck. Tagliani currently 4th. So you hear the calls to bring the leaders of the race in. Crews now begin to set tires over the walls, waiting for the arrival of this man, race leader Tony Kanaan.
No copy.
And so Tony Kanaan pits on the 106th lap of the 154 run for Gary Gerould. what I assume will be his last stop.
Well, that's what we'll be seeing if they can play it out that way. We might mention that our cameraman, Rick Rice, is playing hurt here this afternoon, Paul. He took a horrendous fall, destroyed a camera. He's got another camera. He's bandaged up. He's giving you the shots now of Kanaan making this pit stop. Watching the crew, everything appears to be absolutely routine. Fuel, tires, no wing changes that we can see. Revs up, Kanaan pulls away. He'll try to get back up there and fight for the lead. Zanardi may be into the next lap, or at the most 2 more. No, they're laid out for him. He should be here momentarily.
Tony Kanaan comes out. Textbook pit stop. Here comes Zanardi. And as he turned onto the pit road, Kenny Brack stayed out, picked up the lead of the race. Brack followed by Tagliani and then Carpentier and Pappas. Full change of rubber for Zanardi.
Small change to the front wings.
Waiting only for fuel now. And nobody wants to make a fuel mistake at this point.
But I've done the calculations here. They have to go 47 laps, which is 2.75 miles per gallon. That is, on a super speedway where you can draft, stay in top or overdrive gear, stay out of the throttle, breathe the engine a lot. That's not impossible to do. Here it might be a lot tougher, especially since they're not getting as big a draft. This is going to be very interesting. Now these laps that Kenny Brack is extending could play out very, very much at the end of this race.
Well, this time, Kenny Brack was able to roll up a little further on the field as he's going to go around Zanardi on Zanardi's out lap. And what will be Kenny Brack's in lap here in perhaps one more. He went 3 laps further than everyone else first time around.
These guys can't get this mileage. They just putting the pedal to the metal absolutely full rich and assuming they have to do a splash and go in the end or depend on a yellow in order to make it.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at these mileage numbers, and this is going to be a very interesting game. We already saw in the first couple of rounds of stops under green, the first one under green, that Kenny Brack, especially Oriol Servia, he was the master being able to go a couple laps farther than anybody else.
Kanaan, Zanardi, and the rest all came out in 16th, 17th, 18th. So that tells you how many cars also have not yet stopped. Gary Gerald?
Well, just a quick update on Kanaan. And Parker, you were talking about getting a chuckle, and isn't it great to occasionally get something to make you laugh? Tony Kanaan's instructions on the radio as he exited the pits: be a money maker. I'll buy that.
Thanks, Gary. That's 2 laps for the day. That's 2 for the week, I think.
But you know, since they brought it up that way, all $500,000 of the purse is going to relief aid in the United States. And Joe Heitzler, the chairman and CEO, chairman, president, CEO of CART, this morning was saying he is certainly considering even giving a good portion of the sanction fee, which is several $1 million, to the relief work in the United States as well. Kenny Brack back in front, 112 laps right now, followed by Tagliani and Carpentier, and Ford's dominate. Max Pappas has come into third. In the pits right now, Adrian Fernandez and Tagliani slowing to come on the pit road. So does Pappas as well. Brack, though, stays out. Comes up behind the leader of just a few laps ago, Tony Kanaan, trying to put him down a lap. So Pappas rolls on the pit road. Max Pappas, who, remember, the past several races have been truly devastating to him. Accident with his teammate at Michigan, again at Mid-Ohio.
Had that horrific accident in Vancouver. But Max Pappas, and for a number of these drivers, this race is a home race. They've been able to go back home to their home countries. For Max, it was Italy.
Brack is the leader in the pits. Servia was in second. Ricardo Knoll, crew chief on the car. We watch from his point of view again. He holds Kenny. Hold him, hold him. Fuel is there. Let's go. Another nice stop for the Ray Hall Letterman group, servicing the Kenny Brack car.
I also noticed on that stop, a number of drivers guessed wrong on their shields. We saw a clear shield on Max and Kenny. It's really tough on the driver's eye, especially as they come out of one. They're looking in the sun for just a moment, depending on the cloud cover. normally going to a much darker shield, but there were reports today, depending on who you talk to, that we would see a lot of clouds in the area and potentially rain. And when those drivers go to those cleared shields, the glare is just horrible off track. You see the difference here on Servia's shield going to the full polarized dark shield.
So Oriol Servia, Lola Chassis, Ford power here. Fords have been very powerful here mid-race. Picked up the lead for a single lap, and then he makes his pit stop. And that gives the race over to Michael Andretti. Now, Michael Andretti already has 3 stops, and he's one of those guys, along with Dario, that you suggested. Whoa! Speaking of Dario, was second place and just pulls completely off of the track.
And you can see the oil streaming out of the bottom of the car. Don't know if it's engine or gearbox.
Well, they were worried about both. That tells you it's engine.
That sucker's overheating big time there.
They were worried about the engines. They were worried about the gearboxes coming in here. You mentioned the snapping of the gears and how tremendous the loads are. And they were also worried about the constant high revs that the engines were going to see. Michael Andretti, the leader. Takagi comes to second place. Townsend Bell will be third. How cool could that be? Every time somebody moves a position, you think about, okay, where can this go? Townsend Bell, his first race, a winner.
26 years old from Vila, California, leading the Indy Lights Championship. He's dominated it all year long. Gary Gerald and Ron Beekes have been covering his success. Has had 2 tests in the car, one at Mid-Ohio, one at Chicago. Very much impressed Jim McGee and everyone else at Pat Patrick. But significant for this weekend, they moved Ed Nethman, an outstanding engineer from Jimmy Vasser's car, over to engineer Townsend Bell. There's some interesting psychology there now that Jimmy Vasser's announced they'll be going to Rahal next year. I worked with Ed Nethman years ago with the Motorola team. And I tell you, that relationship between driver and engineer, especially coming to a new venue, especially when you've got so limited track time because of weather, is so important. And now he's getting very, very racy.
Townsend Bell, not a battle here for position, but that is, after all, Helio Castroneves that he is about to overhaul. That's got to feel good.
Yeah, the Indy 500 winner, guy who's been so prominent this year in the championship. Once again, the difference between this car and Jimmy Vasser's car, you can see the green striping on the nose. There are black rear wing end plates on this car. A little difference in the helmet, well, that's a little bit more difficult to distinguish. This car being prepped and run this weekend by the lads at Dale Coyne. All the pit equipment's here. The only thing they're not allowed to do is make that engine change. Toyota insisting that the Pat Patrick crew does that and not the Ford Cosworth crew from Dale Coyne Racing.
Michael Andretti, the leader, by 5.5 seconds over to Toru Takagi.
Easy for you to say.
Yes, thank you. You ought to see it if I try to pronounce his formal first name. Andretti onto the pit road. Actually, this comes a little earlier than I would have thought.
Yeah, but now he's good to the end. Absolutely, these other guys are really going to be stretching it. This is going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Watch the guys come around them, come around them.
You hear them telling Michael to be careful because the Takagi crew is out. He dodges them, hits into a luxury of a 43-foot-long pit box, among the biggest pit boxes on the circuit. It's an extremely wide pit road, so there's room to race, but at 50 miles an hour when he pulls away, no aero changes, fueling complete, and Andretti is gone. His 4th stop should be his last.
Good job.
And least we forget, Michael Andretti was the only driver, as we watched Takagi come in and Bell and Moreno leave the pits. Michael was the only driver who was in the United States when the terrorist attacks occurred. And so he couldn't leave for some considerable time, missing everything going on here until an arrival at the last minute yesterday. Exhausted, 36 hours with no sleep. Walker crew works Takagi, waits for a full fuel load. And he's gone. Junqueira now leads. Many people were already in Europe when the terrorist attacks occurred. Our television crew was in Europe. Teams were in Europe, but not quite everybody. Not everyone on our crew, not everyone within CART. So Junqueira, one of our new race winners this year, is now in front. Dixon comes up to second, followed by that wily old champion Zanardi.
It's good to see that he's in a position that we can talk about him in a positive light.
And so that entire order shifts again as Junqueira heads for pit road. And to show you,
10-4.
Scott Dixon, who is second on the pit road as well. Zanardi will go back to the lead. And so Dixon in and out.
As you said earlier, because of food poisoning or flu earlier, missed the 2-hour practice session, only got the half-hour practice session this morning. It's a tough way for a rookie, even though it's a new track for everyone, to get up to speed on this new 2-mile oval.
And we're going to keep an eye on Townsend Bell while we go away. May have some problems on his car. We'll be back. It was Australia, 1998, that Zanardi last led a race in this series. He's back leading it again. Tony Kanaan up to second place, just as Parker predicted, with the split strategies now. Once Group B got all of their stops done, now here is Group A. Zanardi, Kanaan, Breck, Tagliani, and Pappas coming back to the front of the field.
But these guys have to go 47 laps on a tank of fuel. That's 2.75 miles per gallon. And either they're taking the strategy we've seen in the past. Remember Gilles de Ferran at Portland 2 years running, once with Walker, once with Penske.
B1 plus 3. B1 plus 3.
Said forget fuel mileage, just crank this thing up and get a big enough lead so we can then come in and do a splash and go. Or they're able to run these sorts of times at that kind of mileage. I'm starting to think that they're just now, I mean, right now Zanardi's 2 seconds ahead of Kanaan, who's another 2.5 seconds ahead of Breck, who's then going to do this quickly, is 9 seconds ahead of Tag. So I think these guys are just absolutely flat out trying to build up. What do we figure? 2/3, almost a full lap.
Yeah, full lap. They have no other choice. It was 3/4 for the first round to stop, and it ended up being a full lap that you lost under green second round.
Now, they're not going to take on tires. It'll just be a splash and go, so they won't lose quite all that time. But still, he's got to pull out a very large margin, or these guys are just so superior that they're able to get tremendous mileage and maintain this sort of speed. And I haven't figured out which one it is yet.
Well, it's the roll in and roll out that's really the problem. So if you position your pit in a way to take advantage of that, maybe that helps you. Gary Gerald, update on Dario Franchitti. What happened there?
He caught us right on the run as we pull up to Dario. German television waiting to talk with him. We'll let them go ahead, but we'd lost track of him in the last few laps, and all of a sudden we realized he wasn't on the circuit. Checked with Kyle Moyer. They said there was an apparent engine problem. The engine got tight. It seized up. Dario just pulled off the course. Didn't create a yellow. He's made his way back to the pits. And momentarily, I think we'll be able to get a word from him, Paul.
Yeah, we saw a lot of coolant, water, and other coolant materials pouring out of the back of that car, always a sign of overheating. And overheating comes as who knows what problem with the engine, but now it's tightened it up. At least he got it off before it turned into a much bigger problem, letting oil on the track.
And depending on how the strategies play out for some of these teams, it's either going to be a hero or despised for not bringing out that yellow.
Zanardi, Kanaan. Morris Nunn cars running first and second. And Kenny Breck driving for Ray Hall Letterman. And Alex Tagliani driving for Forsyth Players. Max Pappas, the second of the Ray Hall Letterman cars. There's the pit stops. Look at Andretti's. You know, that's
Or Scott Dixon and the Pac West team picking up 6 spots in the pits.
Well, now we have a chance to talk with Dario Franchitti. Again, Gary Gerald.
Dario, tell us about what it's like running at this new tri-oval and what kind of a day you were having until the engine went away.
Yeah, it's great. You know, we have a fantastic crowd here. And you know, it was a lot of fun out there. We were racing well. We had a good strategy, I felt, because we were one of the few guys who could go to the pit stop. At the end of the race was one more pit stop, so things were looking good, but the engine just let go.
Dario, how much of a relief was it to be able to go racing and business as usual and forget, at least for a short time, the distractions of the world?
It was fantastic. For me personally, to get in the car, do what I do best, you know, and do what I can to memorialize the victims of what happened in New York and Washington. Just, you know, just do what I can do my own way to say, you know, we're thinking about you.
Thank you, Dario.
Thank you.
Well, Alex Zanardi is on a tear. Christian Fittipaldi just slowed down, but at the same time, Zanardi was flying. Kanaan staying with him as best he can. Helio Castroneves is down in 14th place. And that's going to lead us to a discussion when we come back, because you got 3 teams occupying the top 6. When I would have thought that if you were a team, you might want to split the team a little bit in today's strategy. We'll be back. Now beginning to move to the closing laps of the race, but expecting some massive pit strategy gaming going on here. It's Zanardi and Kanaan, 2 drivers for Morris Nunn. Then Kenny Breck, driver for Bobby Rahal and Dave Letterman. Then Alex Tagliani for Forsythe, Pappas for Rahal, Letterman, and Carpentier for Forsythe players. So 3 teams, top 6 positions. Why wouldn't you have split your cars on the fuel strategy?
That is an excellent question.
Thank you. And the answer is?
I'll let you know in a little bit. But right now,
I'll bet some owners are saying the same thing right now, because what it does is there's a group down in there that includes, by the way, the points leader, Helio Castroneves, that is theoretically going to be at the lead of the race. DeFerrin may be there as well. Scott Dixon may be there, and Paul Tracy there. It just depends on how this split's going to come.
Well, we've got DeFerrin leading the championship, Castroneves 3rd, Paul Tracy a little farther back, but as I'm watching Zanardi, he's coming up to lap Paul Tracy. And watching Zanardi, he is driving a car that is so hooked up. He is obviously in the zone where he's passing people high, low. And look at his teammate now. It closed. He had a 2.1 second gap.
Yeah, he may be about to be passed by his teammate, though, as Kanaan looks inside.
And that happened very quickly. It was only 2.1 seconds just a lap and a half ago. And look at Zanardi has actually slowed way down in comparison to Tracy, because he had caught him very, very fast. But what I was going to say is, you don't get these moments very often on an oval when everything comes together and everything's right, and you can do anything with the car.
Zanardi, once Tracy takes him, Tracy gives him the room, but Kanaan gets caught.
No, he's by
a little
now.
momentum. He's by, but
there's no longer day on a track than when the car is not right on an oval, but there is no greater feeling in the world than when the car is right. And I think both Zanardi and Tony Kanaan are experiencing that right now. It's not so much that they're brilliant as much as everybody's slowing down, but there's nothing more exhilarating when the car is hooked up.
19 laps to go. Morris Nunn drivers, Zanardi and Kanaan, are at the front. Gary Gerald.
Morris Nunn watching anxiously, and remember, from pit road with this high shoulder, high wall, you can't see the cars. Morris, what's the strategy? Do you have enough fuel to go the distance for both cars?
No, that last yellow caught us just a little off. We're about 8 laps short of fuel, so we do have to stop.
That's with both cars.
Pardon?
Both cars.
Yes.
When may we see that happen?
When?
He's going to actually tell him. That's great, Gary.
Oh, like one.
Thank you.
I was going to say 142. That'd be 37 laps out from the last stop at 107, and I think that's just about it. Well, that answers that question. These guys are just flat out on it. They're now 7 seconds ahead of Kenny Breck. The next car is Max Pappas. They're 23 seconds up on Max.
But I've also never seen an owner lean over and calculate it for Gary. Normally they have an answer that's pretty close in the range, but Morris, he's an engineer. I'm going to be dead right if I'm going to give this answer.
Mo Nunn's a class act. If he can't tell you, he won't lie to you. He'll just say, I can't tell you. Otherwise, he'll tell you exactly the way it is.
Zanardi, Kanaan, Kenny Breck. But Breck is back almost 7 seconds from this battle for the lead.
A telling tale.
Plus 25, Andretti. Plus 25, Andretti.
So they're giving him back to Andretti, who's on that other strategy, back in 7th place. They don't care about the guys 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. They're just trying to figure out who they have to beat in their group to then gain track position, because they know these other guys are going to have to come in as well.
So what they really need is about 30 on Andretti.
Okay. We'll see.
30, 33. Some, you know.
Somewhere in there, I think you're pretty close. And that's what they're shooting for. I was going to say, a few laps ago, they went by Scott Dixon. You could see Scott look to the left, close the door on Zanardi as he was going to come in to try to pass him. And Zanardi just drove around him on the outside. You could see Scott's head go, whoa, where did he go? And that's terribly embarrassing for a driver.
I have a report that Roberto Moreno may have pulled off and ended his day prematurely as well. Zanardi, Kanaan, Breck, 2 Hondas, and then 4 Fords are lined up in the top 6. Okay. Zanardi, Kanaan, Breck, 14 laps left to go. Any time now, this entire group, Zanardi, Kanaan, Breck, Pappas, Carpentier, and Tagliani, all should stop, and Kanaan becomes the first of them to do so. It'll just be a quick splash, one assumes. Would there be any...
Wide open pit lane. It's going to be a fairly short one, so be ready to go.
Running green, fuel is all. You don't have the time to hope for any tires.
Time stop here.
Fuel only. Watch for the tap on the back. There it is.
He'll have a bruise tomorrow morning.
Oh, boy.
And go like hell. This is it, Tony.
And I've been looking at these numbers as Zanardi comes in.
Zanardi's in. You're looking at the numbers. He jumps on the brakes.
Servia can make it to the end. He's got to go 40 laps, but he's been the fuel mileage king today. I'm not so sure about Andretti and the rest, but we know Servia can. So they're looking for Andretti and Servia on their way out. We'll see how this blends in.
Gary, nice stop.
It was 5.3 seconds on my clock. Kanaan's was 6.4. Now they've got to go to work. We're going to head for the Rahal land and see what the story is for Kenny Breck.
Yeah, I would suspect you're going to have to run, Gary, because he's going to be in there fairly quickly. Breck picks up the lead. Oh, and Zanardi, with a terrible crash. Yellow is out. Zanardi coming out in turn 1. Loses control of the car. Rest of the field, look at him slow down. There's debris all over that racetrack.
They'll go down over the curbs if necessary. There's so much carbon fiber on that track everywhere. It'll cut the tires. What we saw is he got T-boned just unbelievably in the front of the tub. It was an enormous hit.
The field completely slowed now. And it will slow with Kenny Breck as the leader of the race. And just 11 laps left to go. Kart safety team is there. We'll sort it out, let you know what happens when we come back. Caution, the Lausitz, Germany, the German 500K at the Euro Speedway. Devastating accident involving Alex Tagliani and Alex Zanardi. And there is the very real possibility that this race finishes under yellow because the accident occurring so close to the finish, the track badly littered with debris and rescue efforts going on at both cars. Down at the medical center, Gary Gerould is with Dr. Steve Olvey.
Dr. Stephen Olvey has just come out of the medical center. Doctor, can you give us information relating to both drivers?
Yeah, Gary, Alex Zanardi is extremely critical. He's had severe injuries to both of his lower extremities, has had significant blood loss, but he is responding. He is breathing on his own. So we're sending him to the Berlin Major Trauma Center. Alex Tagliani is awake and alert. He's moving everything. He has only back pain. We think he may have a minor injury to the small of his back. Otherwise, he's okay. They're both going to the same hospital in Berlin.
So both men are being air evac'd at this time?
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, they did, in fact, finish under the yellow. And when we return, we will give you a full report on the conclusion of the race and what else we know about the accident. Kenny Breck, as we suggested, took the win of the race with his teammate Max Pappas finishing in second and pulling up alongside. As soon as the race was complete, Gary Gerould had a chance to talk with Europe's first winner.
Kenny Breck, it's difficult to celebrate a victory when you've had such an unfortunate accident that has ended this race, but Tell me about your emotions and how this day went, at least up until that hit and brought out the yellow flag that effectively ended the race.
Well, I mean, we were up there all the race. We didn't have the fastest car. I think both Zanardi and Kanaan was a little better. We were better on fuel mileage, but it's good for me and for the team to get the victory here. But it's in light of recent happenings, both in the United States and here, it's put a big damping on everything. And I hope Zanardi and the play guy is okay, and I really hope everything else will be okay too. So.
Kenny, you had a very close call yourself early in the race. You made one of the most marvelous saves we've ever seen at high speed. How close did it come to getting away totally?
Yeah, that was very close. I don't know. I guess Gidley didn't see me. I was nearly up alongside, and I took for granted that he saw me, and obviously he didn't, and turned down, and we touched, and I went over to his side. But everything is okay, so that's no problem.
Get you right back in the championship hunt. I want to talk to your teammate as well, Max Papis, who ends up in the second spot. Max, after the emotions of this week and now an accident like this, it's hard to put a handle or a perspective on a day like this. Can you share some of your thoughts?
It's very difficult, you know. The emotions of the good result for Team Lear are completely overshadowed by what happened with my friend Alex and you know, with what happened in the United States. You know, I really don't know what to say. I pray God that you know, that the good wins over the bad situation, and this is a sport event. We are, you know, showing people that with a goodwill you can achieve great goals in your life, and that's what Alex and all the people that they are successful always think about. So I pray for my friend Alex. This is the most important things, and you know, for all the people in the United States that you know, God take care of them. Thanks.
Thank you, Max.
It was clearly and well said by Max Papis. In fact, in many ways, the goal of the day was to show goodwill to the German people who came out to the track here today. So Breck is the winner and led the most laps. Papis a second, Carpentier third.
Here is the latest information on Alex Zanardi's condition as of Monday afternoon. The two-time kart champion, who lost both of his legs in a crash during Saturday's race in Germany, underwent more surgery on Monday. Doctors say today's procedure was to check for fragments and infection. They say everything looks fine at the moment. There are no infections, the skin looks good, and the muscles look good. But the doctor leading the team of surgeons treating Alex says it's too early to say if he is out of danger. The doctor does say that it's his impression that Zanardi is getting more stable. Doctors are reducing fluids and drugs to take Alex out of an induced coma. I'm joined now on the phone by ESPN analyst Parker Johnstone, who remains in Berlin. Parker, do you have any new word on Alex's condition?
Well, as you mentioned, John, they did perform another surgery. The feeling that I came away with from the hospital is everyone is so impressed with the will and the drive, the heart of Alex Zanardi. They said he is in remarkable shape and recovering much more quickly than they had expected. Another ultrasound was performed. They are concerned with the severe fluid loss of damage to the internal organs. That checked out 100%. Of course, you earlier reported that he had a slight fracture of the pelvis. That seems to be doing just fine. They expect him to be in ICU, the last word that I had, for about another week, and then he would move to a regular hospital, most likely closer to his home in Monaco, most likely in Nice, for 1 to 3 more weeks, and then he would go straight into rehabilitation. But everyone at the hospital is just so impressed with the heart of Alex Zanardi as he continues to recover quickly.
Well, that is certainly good news. By the way, who is at the hospital with Alex?
Well, today, probably the best news, and the person that we've all been the most concerned with is Daniela, Alex's wife, and she threw everybody out of the hospital today, which is tremendous that she did that. He was joined by drivers immediately after the conclusion of the race. Jimmy Vasser, his best friend, was there, Roberto Moreno, Tony Kanaan, as well as Morris Nunn and his wife. A couple of crew members were there. Reassuringly, a couple of nurses from the CART medical staff were there. And just to show support to Daniela, and as we left the hospital, Daniela's brother-in-law, who's also a physician, and her mother joined Daniela there at the hospital. But Daniela was doing quite well. As you reported, they're going to slowly wean Alex off the drugs so that he can regain consciousness over the next 12 to 24 hours. And that's when this fight, the mental fight, will become quite tough.
How critical was the fact that the entire CART medical crew was at the track on Saturday?
John, the very fact that the CART safety team and the medical crew led by Dr. Steve Olvey and Dr. Terry Trammell were there was the key to Alex Zanardi being alive. Their quick action, their understanding of the nature of the trauma, their familiarity with the car, the Hans device, the helmets, those guys being some of the best trained in the world, I think, is the reason that Alex Zanardi is still alive. So without them, I think we would have a much more difficult report, but as it is, Alex is alive and improving.
Can you describe for us exactly what happened in that accident?
The worst possible scenario in any sort of impact is speed differential and also angle of impact. And these cars are incredibly well designed to absorb impact both from the front and from the rear, but they don't handle side impacts very well. Alex Tagliani, who had absolutely no place to go as Alex Zanardi came across the track, probably a 200 mile an hour or just about at that speed impact at a fairly high angle of incidence across just below the driver's hips to his feet, just as you saw, ripped the car in two pieces. And it is the worst accident you could possibly have in these kind of cars, and the fact that Alex survived it all is just a miracle.
Parker, you raced against Alex for 2 seasons, and you've covered his career as a broadcaster. How do you think Alex Zanardi is going to handle this situation?
And that was a topic of conversation both before I left the track and then also at the hospital. And the drivers, team owners know that of all the drivers in that paddock, that there is no one stronger on and off the racetrack than Alex Zanardi. And Jimmy Vasser kind of laughed and told me that he expected Alex to be ski racing this winter, because if there's anybody that's going to fight this with the latest prosthetic devices, with the best technology, with the hardest training and rehab possible, it'd be Alex Zanardi. So obviously devastating for him personally, but I'm sure we'll see Alex back up and around and competing in some form of sport or another very, very soon.
Thank you, Parker Johnstone in Berlin. It's almost incomprehensible to think about Alex Zanardi not driving a Champ car anymore. During his first stint in the CART FedEx Championship Series, he captured our hearts and minds with his aggressive driving style and his genuine victory celebrations.
When Alex Zanardi arrived on the Champ Car scene in 1996, he did so with little fanfare. In 25 Formula One starts over 4 years, Zanardi had managed a point-scoring finish just once. But Zanardi quickly served notice that American open-wheel racing was more suited to his aggressive style. Alex won the pole at Brazil in just his second race and captured his first win in his 9th start at Portland.
Here's the man of the hour as he makes the final turn around the carousel here and on to the main stretch, as Alex Zanardi has taken the win here.
Zanardi would go on to capture 2 more wins in '96, on his way to a tie for second in the point standings. Alex would punctuate his rookie campaign with what would become the most famous pass in Champ Car history.
Oh, look at here he comes, and he gets him! Can he get him back? Can he hang on? Oh, look at this! Down through the first on the final lap. And Alex Zanardi, with a brilliant move, takes the checkered flag from the pole and the win here at Laguna Seca.
In 1997 and '98, Zanardi dominated en route to back-to-back titles. The CART record book would become his resume, as he set new marks for consecutive pole positions with 6 and tied the mark for consecutive wins with 4. But it was what Zanardi did after those wins that was drawing the attention of mainstream sports fans. His celebratory donuts have since become the standard in winter circles all over the country.
Donuts? He's asking the crowd, you want to see me go around? Oh, he stalled the car. He stalled the car. That's it. Let's push start him. What the heck?
Anyways, the technique, there you see it. With his stock and his confidence at an all-time high, Zanardi decided to return to Formula One with the Williams team, the same team that had led 1995 CART champ Jacques Villeneuve to the world driving title in 1997. But the magic Zanardi had displayed in the 3 previous years was nowhere to be found. Alex failed to score a point in '99 and was released at year's end. After taking the 2000 season off, Zanardi decided to return to the site of his past glory, reuniting with his former engineer Maurice Nunn for the 2001 season.
I know there's a lot of work in front of us that needs to be done, but me and Maurice are big friends, and we are going to enjoy every single moment of the season in front of us, I hope.
But Alex has struggled, scoring points in just 4 of the season's first 14 races, leading to rumors that he would retire for good at season's end. Ironically, the 20 laps that Zanardi led in Germany marked the first time he had been out front all season.
Once again, updating Alex Zanardi, he remains in critical but stable condition, but his condition does continue to improve. We'll be back tonight at 6 o'clock Eastern with RPM Tonight on ESPN2. We'll have more coverage of Alex Zanardi and to his family. So long, everyone.